Coming up on Face the State, what comes next for former President Donald Trump? We're talking with an Ohio State University legal expert. Plus, our conversation with Ohio's U.S. senators continues. We'll talk inflation, debt ceiling, and credit card fees. Also ahead, redlining.
We're saying the same thing. We just know we can't publicly say, I don't want black people, I don't want Jewish people, I don't want people of color in my neighborhood.
The conversation about what's really going on in our communities. Face the State starts now. And now on Face the State, former President Donald Trump is expected to surrender this week. He's the first former president to face federal indictment. Thank you so much for joining us here on Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. Ohio State University law professor emeritus Joshua Dressler says this new indictment is stronger than the first. He argues the involvement of classified documents poses a threat to our national security. Still, he feels a unanimous conviction will be difficult.
I think that from a legal perspective, the case against him is strong, but from a legal, practical perspective, getting 12 jurors to convict a person of this importance is going to be difficult.
The charges were filed in Florida, and this expert thinks that could work in Trump's favor, meaning a trial would also be held there as opposed to Washington, D.C. Also this morning, Ohio's U.S. Senators JD Vance and Sherrod Brown talking with us about recent happenings in Washington, D.C. Senator Vance talking about his decision to vote against the debt ceiling bill. And of course, we'll have more of that kind of conversation we had with U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, what he told us about East Palestine and the drug epidemic in our state. Let's start with Senator Vance and his no vote on the debt ceiling. We asked him, what's next?
Well, look, I mean, that fight is over. I didn't like the bill. I think it was important for the country to pay its debts, but I didn't like that particular piece of legislation because it did a lot of things aside from paying the country's debts that I think made a lot of mistakes and frankly are going to cause some problems for us long term. For example, I really don't like this idea that we're going to spend billions of dollars in this country to subsidize rich people buying electric vehicles when working families are struggling with inflation. And look, we tried to change it, we tried to make it better, but it didn't happen. And the bill is passed, now we have to deal with the consequences. You know, my view here is that over the next couple of years, we need to try to make the American economy as strong as possible. If you think about how to deal with the debt, one way is to cut spending, and clearly that approach was largely rejected with the most recent package. That's what I think we should be doing. But we also need to build more in our country and try to produce some more economic activity. That increases tax revenues and drives down the debt and deficit in the process. So really where we are right now is we have some problems to solve in the country. It's still way too hard to develop America's energy resources. That's driving up costs for consumers. It's still way too hard to build housing. One of the reasons why we have such skyrocketing housing costs. Interest rates are way too high, which is pushing inflation all across the state of Ohio. So there are problems for us to solve, and we're going to keep on working on them, even though we didn't like the outcome of the particular debt ceiling deal that we cut.
It's insane. We're the only two.
Last week we sat down for a one-on-one interview with Senator Sherrod Brown to talk about his support for the legislation.
Rightly or wrongly, as a Congress, as a president, as the American people. It was a common sense move. It was every Republican, every Democrat from the House, from Ohio's delegation, all 15, voted for it as I did. There's two things that really matter. One is we just couldn't afford to default. We never have. We've always paid our bills as a country through every president, through every Congress. Because if you don't, if you default, all kinds of bad things. We don't know for sure, but lost jobs, lost pensions, Social Security, Medicare, all the things that can happen. So we had to do that. But the other thing that I like about this is we protected Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and veterans benefits in light of the fact, especially, that some on the far right in the House, the representatives, have wanted to privatize Social Security and Veterans Administration. So I consider it a victory. That's why it got a resounding bipartisan vote.
So let me ask you a couple things. JD Vance voted against it, and he said he felt like it didn't really speak to the inflation issues that his constituents are facing?
I'm not JD Vance. Bring him on the show and ask him.
We will do that.
But the fact is, all 10 Republicans, all 5 Democrats in the House of Representatives voted for it. And I didn't know. I talked to JD pretty often.
Yeah.
We're working on this railroad bill together. But I didn't ask him. I never really asked, as much as Rob Portman and I work together. I didn't really ever say, "Why'd you vote that way, Rob?" It's not really my business.
And of course, you heard the senator mention the rail legislation that he is co-sponsoring with Senator Vance. We asked him how that's progressing.
Senator Vance and I have worked since it happened. We talked to the same people, so it wasn't hard for us to write a bill together. I've gone there. I've been there more than once a month. My job is really 3 things. One is to help them restore their lives back to normal as much as possible, and that means holding this company accountable for any illnesses people have, for the lost value in their homes, for the dairy farmers that can't sell their milk. Even though it's probably not contaminated, buyers will not. You wouldn't buy that milk for your 20-plus-year-old son. You would buy milk made, from Guernsey's in Mansfield, near Lexington, Ohio, wherever. And so they've had any illnesses that people get. So we've got to help them do that. Vance and I have to pass this train bill, this rail safety bill. We're going to get it through the Senate floor in the next couple of weeks, I think.
The other thing we want to ask you about public safety, you were here last week before, talking about the fentanyl crisis. Can you talk more about that work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm aligning always on these kinds of things with law enforcement in several ways. One is making sure that law enforcement has the tools and the equipment it needs to deal with fentanyl safely, and that's a problem. Second, that we scale up as we did a news conference here and a meeting with law enforcement and treatment centers. We've got to scale up treatment. And the third is a bill I'm working on. We have 45 sponsors in the Senate, about half of each party, to sanction the Chinese for selling these chemicals into Mexico, and the drug lords and the money launderers and the criminal organizations in Mexico that are making this stuff more potent all the time. It's more dangerous than ever. And most of the overdose deaths, something like 80% of them have as its base fentanyl. And so it's a terrible chemical. It's a terrible thing in this country. It's a scourge for far too many families. And these deaths are so often unexpected. I know several people who have had that happen in their families. They know their son or daughter had some addictions issues, but they were managing them, they thought, and the next day they're dead. And we've got to get it under control, and I think we're on the way to doing that.
And we should note, Norfolk Southern has promised to support the community of East Palestine. Could there be a legislative fix to credit card fees? Ohio Senator JD Vance thinks yes. The Republican told us that he's signing on to legislation that would curb charges from Visa and MasterCard. Several senators announced this past week that they want to require merchants to have a choice of at least 2 routing networks when consumers pay by credit card. One of those would have to be outside the top 2 networks.
What we're really trying to do, working with Senator Marshall, my colleague from Kansas, is to make the credit card system in this country a little bit more competitive. It's really dominated right now by a couple of companies, and I think that has reduced consumer choices and has frankly made a lot of our small businesses squeezed out because they're paying so much for credit card transactions because they don't have it anywhere else to go. There's not enough competition in that market. So what we're really trying to do is just create some more choices for consumers, for merchants, for small businesses all across the state of Ohio. And I think that's what the legislation is geared to do.
Some analysts say this won't pass the Senate. They believe it pits big banks against small merchants and giant merchants against small banks. A similar push in the previous Congress failed. And speaking of prices, as you might expect, the senators see the student loan debt issue differently. Senator Brown still thinks the president's push to forgive those bills can happen, but Senator Vance thinks it's the universities that need to pay.
The student loan crisis is really affecting a lot of young people, and I think for too often sort of the response to a lot of people is, well, you took out the loans, you've got to pay your debts. And look, that's absolutely right. People do have to pay their debts, but we also have to recognize, I think, a lot of the colleges are inflating the costs of tuition way beyond what it needs to be. They're hiring a lot of staff that have nothing to do with the core mission of education, and they're burdening our young people with a lot of debt in the process. Now, the problem I have is there are 2 ways to solve this, right? On the one hand, you could put that student loan debt on the taxpayers. You could effectively ask a blue-collar worker to pay the debts of somebody else, somebody who has much higher earning potential. That to me is fundamentally unfair and un-American. But we could also do the thing where we force the colleges to assume some of the costs of the debt bomb that they're creating in our country. And that's what I think we should be doing. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Biden administration has really missed an opportunity here. We know the colleges are causing this debt problem. Let's force them to deal with the consequences and actually assume some responsibility, not pass it off to the American taxpayer.
And of course, you're here in Columbus, Ohio State. I have to ask about student loans. Now, people who owe have to repay that money.
Yeah, well, it's not certain yet. There was a vote, but Biden will veto that. I mean, one of the, I'll take it in a slightly different place. And yes, the answer is we need to do something about that. But the other part of that is we are going to see, particularly people with Intel, in the infrastructure bill we passed, there's going to be huge numbers of jobs available for tradespeople, for carpenters and electricians and painters and insulators and operating engineers and laborers. Those union jobs that pay well, and those are people that can go straight out of high school or straight out of community college or straight out of vocational school, join up trades apprenticeship programs. And mostly they've been people that look like me over the years. There are going to be a lot more women, a lot more people that look like you that are going to go through these apprentice programs. You start off making $18 to $20 an hour with benefits. By your fourth or fifth year of apprenticeship, you're making $70,000 or $80,000 a year, again, with no college debt. And you have a very productive job building things, and as a union tradesperson, and you can raise your family in a middle class environment. So we'd have to deal with student loans for sure.
Right.
But we should quit preaching everybody's got to go to college. Everybody's got to go to college because so many kids have debt and never get out from under it. In these apprentice jobs, these union, very skilled trades jobs can lead to a really good lifestyle. We're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to need at least 5,000 tradespeople building Intel, and then thousands more that are building all the ancillary supply chain to Intel.
Which sounds good, but if I still owe money and I've been hoping for some repayment assistance, what?
Well, we're
is our
still
message?
trying, and I mean the president stood strong on that. I voted with him. I think that help will still be there. I'm hopeful it's as much as we think it can be.
A lot of folks hoping for that. Columbus City leaders say they want your thoughts on spending, when and where. You can weigh in. Sticker shock could be coming in August for homeowners in Franklin County. That's when they'll get a tentative valuation on their homes. And the Franklin County auditor expects them to be at historic highs. On Wednesday, an opportunity to talk about why and options in cases where a homeowner wants to dispute the appraised value. It came out of the Columbus Metropolitan Club discussion of addressing the consequences of redlining. The discriminatory practice includes the systemic denial of services such as mortgages, insurance loans, and other financial services to people based on their race or ethnicity.
We're saying the same thing. We just know we can't publicly say, I don't want Black people, I don't want Jewish people, I don't want people of color in my neighborhood. And so how do we as community break down this coded language and get back to these root cause issues?
What are we in danger of losing if we don't talk about the history of redlining in this country?
What Monica just brought up is the really important part of this isn't just a housing issue. Like understanding the history of redlining and the correlation that the redlining maps have two current maps about higher infant mortality rates, reduced longevity and lifespans. Like this affects school, this affects health, this affects so many different things. And again, starts with that redlining and the prevention of people of color being able to generate generational wealth. And so if we don't teach that, if people don't understand the history of that, they can't see the correlation to what is happening now and what we can still see and feel as the effects of redlining if we don't fully understand the history of it.
It was certainly my pleasure to serve as moderator in the room where it happened. The Columbus Metropolitan Club is, of course, a group of business leaders, and they hold weekly town hall style forums on various topics, featuring panels of experienced leaders and experts, such as the ones you saw there. Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther has sent his $1.1 billion capital budget to City Council, and they will have the final say on where the money goes. But this past week, our neighbors made their opinions known. Here's 10 TV News reporter Carly Dion.
Our community is growing leaps and bounds.
Far South Columbus resident Becky Walcott is the chair of the area commission there. She says there's currently a lack of resources in that neighborhood that needs immediate attention.
We are talking about safety, medical facilities, that we are having a conversation about lighting, sidewalks.
Those issues, just some of what the mayor's proposed capital budget will cover once approved by City Council. Tonight, representatives from several city departments sharing how they plan to use the money they will receive.
Capital means roads, sidewalks, fire stations, police substations, the most critical infrastructure that we all use each and every day.
Columbus City Council President Shannon Hardin says it's important to the council to hear about what's important to each community. The mayor's proposed budget includes $50 million for affordable housing, $37 million for street resurfacing, and $25 million for roadway and intersection improvements.
I hear over and over and over again about affordable housing and more streets and sidewalks.
The budget also outlines a number of efforts to improve public safety, including $23 million for a new police station in the Hilltop neighborhood and a North Side fire station.
The community asked for it, our offices are asking for it, and it's a great way for us to keep public safety as our top priority.
Walcott says she also wants to see more public transportation options in her Far South community, as well as sidewalks so people can get safely to bus stops.
So that a mother or a father can get their child to daycare and then themselves to work and then back home every day.
Council President Hardin says the challenge now is determining how to address all of the city's growing needs with limited resources to do so.
So we have to make difficult decisions about how we can have the greatest impact with the resources that we have available.
If you want to weigh in on this, you can do that this coming Tuesday during a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can find the details at 10tv.com. All right, this might sound familiar. Social media is lit up this morning with claims about voting machines. Coming up, why Arizona is once again at the center of conversation and whether the claims are true. And some politicians say scenes like this one are a warning from the environment. We'll take a look at how you can protect yourself next. Some political leaders are calling that haze over our country a warning from the environment. Central Ohio has seen a number of air quality alerts in recent days. But what does that mean for you and your family? 10 TV's Lindsay Mills took some of your questions to the medical experts.
Pull up. Melissa Jenkins was looking forward to getting outside with her kids with the cooler temperatures until she saw a hazy sky over the city.
I am a little concerned. I think it's just a little bit more confusing because I'm not sure what's going on with the kids.
She's not sure if they are coughing more now due to the smoke or allergies or a combo of both.
It could be both, that's for sure.
Dr. Mitchell Grayson from Nationwide Children's Hospital says infants and small toddlers are most sensitive to this wildfire smoke. And parents and caregivers will want to take precautions depending on the level of the air quality alert.
If it's in the yellow to orange, we're probably talking you don't want them out there running around for hours kind of things, but less than an hour is going to be fine. If it's in the yellow, they're probably fine doing their normal activities. If they don't have asthma. Now, if they have asthma, the key thing is to make sure that their asthma is as well controlled as possible.
If you want to check your air quality in real time, the MidOhio Region Planning Commission actually uses this website called Purple Air. You'll just Google Purple Air and it comes up. It's the first thing that'll pop up. And you can see here, we'll tap on this one, 144. It updates every 10 minutes in real time. So we can see here, June 7th, 143 here in Columbus. It lets you know the location and what the air quality alert is in real time.
It's something we don't really have to, I don't remember having to deal with.
Air quality is something moms like Melissa Jenkins will be paying closer attention to now that she also thinks she's feeling the effects from it too.
I could tell something this morning, especially with like the bright orange sunrise.
Our thanks to Lindsay Mills for that report. That was advice for young children, but what if you are caring for an aging parent or grandparent? You can find more information on how to do that right now at 10tv.com. Electronic voting machines were under the microscope during the 2020 presidential election. Brandon Lewis from our National Verify team looks into claims that one state plans to do away with them.
The use of electronic voting machines during the 2020 election was controversial in some states, despite no evidence of irregularities. Now, several viral tweets claim Arizona has banned using these machines for the 2024 election. Some posts link to this letter from State Senate Majority Leader Sonny Borelli that says no electronic voting systems may be used as the primary method for conducting, counting, tabulating, or verifying federal elections. But is that true? Let's verify. Our sources are Arizona State Senate Concurrent Resolution 1037, Senate Bill 1074, Arizona State Law, and Arizona's Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes. In March, the Arizona legislature passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 1037. The resolution expressed the legislature's preference that counties stop using electronic voting machines that are manufactured outside of the U.S. and that don't meet certain technical standards. However, SCR 1037 is non-binding, meaning election officials aren't obligated to follow the legislature's preference. Fontes says existing state law allows election officials to continue using the machines. So, no, Arizona did not ban electronic voting machines ahead of the 2024 presidential election. Earlier this year, the legislature passed a similar binding legislation, which was vetoed by the governor and didn't become law. With your Verify, I'm Brandon Lewis.
What can we verify for you? Reach out to our Verify team on social media or by email. 10 TV and Dom Taberry are being recognized for their efforts to put an end to distracted driving. This mission began shortly after Dom lost his daughter, Maria, in a distracted driving accident. Since then, Dom has shared Maria's message with more than 130,000 young people all across the state. This past week, he accepted the 2023 Celebration of Service Award from the National Association of Broadcasters for Maria's message.
TEGNA's mantra is to serve the greater good of our communities. And that really rings with me because that's exactly what Maria's message is doing. Ladies and gentlemen, car crashes remain the leading killer of our children age 8 to 24. That's not acceptable. As moms and dads and grandparents, we should be screaming that that's not acceptable.
And Dom has been sharing his story and testifying before lawmakers, pleading to get them to do something about distracted driving. This January, Governor Mike DeWine signed Senate Bill 288, banning drivers from using or holding electronic devices while their vehicle is in motion. This past week, we here at 10 TV held a day of giving with the MidOhio Food Collective, and through all of your help, more than 100 donations were received, raising more than $7,000. All of the donations from that day will support the children's summer feeding program for MidOhio Food Collective, and we asked them why this is such an important cause.
Families make tough choices every day to make sure that they're meeting their basic needs. And MidOhio Food Collective and our partners are there to help step in when families turn for help when life happens. And it's more important than ever that our community steps alongside us and make sure that nobody in their community goes hungry when we can be there to help together.
All right, if you missed this and you want to make a donation, no worries. You can scan the QR code on your screen. There it is. Or you can text 10TV Food to the number on your screen. Text that to 91999 and make your donation. And we certainly appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us here on Face the State. Have a great week.